As an investigator, we're going to go out there and try to develop leads as we're going along, as we look up one lead. And the worst thing that can happen to you is you run out of leads and the case is closed. What you've developed now is you've got the potential for looking at death certificates.
All the way and all of that lot. So it was really quite fun. Yeah.
We may still find people that are alive that can talk to us.
Ever since I can remember, I have always found Frederick Delius's music deeply haunting, an outpouring of emotion in which I sense a special sadness, a longing for something or someone he had lost and was never to find again. For many years, I have believed that the unique quality in his music is connected in some deep way to a largely unknown period he spent in Florida as a young man. So I'm taking a break from my concert and recording schedule to become a detective. I'm going to try to unravel what is, I suspect, one of the greatest love stories in music never told.
At this moment, I'm very, very excited because this is something that I've wanted to do for approximately 12 years. Now that we're going, it's like I almost can't believe that we are going. I think when we actually step off the plane, I will believe it a little bit more.
When Delius crossed the Atlantic by boat in 1884 aboard the Cunard liner Gallia, he was just 22. He was taking over an orange plantation in northern Florida in order to escape his overbearing father. Fritz, as he was then known, arrived at Solana Grove on the banks of the St. Johns River in March. He found that his plantation was in an inaccessible swamp, infested with mosquitoes and alligators. But surrounded only by nature and the former slaves who looked after the orange trees, he felt liberated and a closeness to the people. Delius scholars dispute what really happened here. Many seem reluctant even to have it discussed. But I believe that the special quality in Delius's music is bound up with the experience he had here between 1884 and 85, the love affair of his life that came to nothing. It was with a black girl called Chloe, and after he left Solana Grove, she bore his son. 12 years later, in 1897, he returned, but Chloe had fled, fearing he would take the boy away, and Delius never found her or his son. Today, all trace of both the orange trees and the story seems to have been erased from the landscape. The site is tended by the Delius Association of Florida.
The March board meeting of the Delius Festival of Florida will come to order. We welcome everyone. We particularly welcome our visitors from England, Miss Tasman Little.
Madam President, and everybody else, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to your meeting. I'm absolutely thrilled to see the good work that you do in promoting a composer that's very special to me. The reason why I'm here is...
I was surprised by the reaction of some of the members of the association when I explained to them the purpose of my visit.
We have no evidence to substantiate the fact that he even fathered a child or anything about the romance, and I am not sure that this is a subject that would be dear to the hearts of our Delius members.
I hope you find evidence. I think it's wonderful. We don't all agree.
I first read of the love affair in an article by Percy Grainger, composer and close friend of Delius, written shortly after Delius's death in 1934. When I wrote my graduation thesis on performing Delius, I repeated the story and found myself under fierce attack. So I phoned the late Dr. Eric Fenby, to whom Delius dictated his works in later life, to ask him why Delius returned to Florida.
Oh, yes, there's no question about it, that he went there.
Yes.
Because there was a child.
Yes.
And he went with the idea of persuading her to come back to Europe with him.
Yes.
One of Delius's last works, dictated to Fenby, was the Idyll. It tells of two lovers who part, but years later yearn to meet again. All is over and long gone, but love is not over. For too long, Delius has been seen as the composer of a very English kind of pastoral music. No wonder the idea of him as a sexually active young man with a black mistress shocks some people. Yet so much of his experience in Florida is deeply embedded in the music. At Delius's house, lovingly removed from Solana Grove to the campus at Jacksonville University, I explained to a local reporter how my interest began while I was a student. I had, by this time, learnt Delius's Violin Concerto, and it was beginning to dawn on me that there were certain elements in Delius's music, but there was a feeling of nostalgia, a feeling of transience, and this rather indefinable sense of harmony, which set me thinking. I thought, he doesn't sound like an English composer. What's going on here? And the fact remains that this feeling is in the music. There must have been some experience that left him with this. I mean, he wasn't writing music like that before 1897. It was after 1897 that his sort of mature style of writing came into being. So something must have happened at that point in time. It was in 1897 that Delius recognised that he would probably never see Chloe again, or find his son. I started my search for proof by talking to Dr. Thomas Gunn, who is in charge of the Delius collection at Jacksonville University.
From our standpoint, I think you need to have some kind of documentation. You need to say there is an eyewitness account, there is something in a diary, something in a letter. Perhaps on this side rather than, say, from Percy Grainger, yeah. Something from the tradition in the black family that says, yes, our great-great-grandfather was a white man who came from England. Is there any kind of tradition like that? Are there any kinds of records that you could say that this Chloe had a child, that she lived in or around near this area?
My hunch was not enough. I needed a real detective. Lou Eliopoulos deals with unidentified homicides.
Usually at the medical examiner's office, we search for lost loved ones all the time, trying to find next of kin, but this is kind of looking for the next of kin of the next of kin of the next of kin. So it goes past our usual resources that we would utilize with up-to-date computers. you have a first name that's kind of unusual that might help us. What we would try to do is look in the Bureau of Census that's computed by the Department of Commerce on a decade basis,
Right.
and try to see if we can find out someone with that name. That population base wasn't too dense in this part during that time, so we have that in our favor.
I was going to need help locating any census material that might survive from Delius's time. So I went to the Historical Society in St. Augustine, the nearest town to Solana Grove.
But we do have a file on Delius if you'd like to look at it.
Charles Tingley is the librarian and very experienced at tracking down lost family histories and tracing family trees. Unfortunately, many of the records that would have helped me find Delius's Chloe and their son had been destroyed years ago in a fire. Luckily, however, Charles had microfilm copies of a Florida state census for 1885, the year that Delius was here.
Someone from Georgia. So there's quite a bit of information, but that will vary from census to census. As you can see, sometimes the handwriting is difficult to read, so it's going to take quite a bit of time to search through this name by name to find your gal. All right?
Live from WAWS, this is Fox 30 News at 11.
By now, the local media had got really interested in the story and were keen to see if they could encourage anyone who had information to come forward. It concerns the story of a classical composer, Frederick Delius, who came here about 100 years ago to Florida. He embraced the culture, the people and the land, and he had an amazing experience here. He was heavily influenced by African American music, and he took this away and made it into his own way of composition. We know from Delius's own correspondence and his friends at the time that he loved listening to the singing of his foreman and the other plantation workers. I discussed this with jazz musician L'Ingenue Parsons, who has made a special study of pre-blues music and the songs sung in this area in the 1880s.
I wish I had my woman. She left me so long ago. She said she had to go to find a life for herself. And I feel so sad. I feel so sad. But I really want to see her again. Maybe something like that.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So it's all based very much around one kind of, or one or two basic harmonies. That first harmony you played, the harmony of the primary key, and then the harmony of the fourth above that.
Yes, which takes us back to Africa, because in Africa there's not really such a strong harmonic conception. Right. It's much more rhythmic and melodic. So that's why instead of having a lot of different chords, what's important is more the fact that you have this rhythmic consistency.
It's really interesting that you keep playing that, because there's many pieces of Delius that have exactly that rhythm. There's a bit in the third violin sonata where it's got this rhythm. Does that strike any chords anywhere?
Yeah, most certainly it does. It certainly sounds like a person singing a spiritual.
Brilliant.
Like we just listened to a little while ago. It sounds like those real slow spirituals.
Can you give me an example?
Okay. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
You know, I know that, and it never even occurred to me. That's fantastic. But you did the da-dum on one of those.
Yeah.
Sing it again, sing it again.
Oh, on the tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
Yeah, right.
One only has to listen to a polka that young Delius wrote in 1885 to get some sense of how profound the change in his music would be as a result of all he experienced in Florida.
Oh, very lyrical too.
A little pencil sketch signed by Delius in 1885 also survives. I wonder, is there any significance in the couple huddled close together in the back of the boat? Delius always said composition could not be taught, but that the only worthwhile lessons he ever had were from a church organist called Thomas Ward, who he met in Jacksonville. Merryday and Payne, the music store where Delius and Ward first met, was close to the river on Ocean Street. Like almost everything else associated with Delius in Jacksonville, no vestige of the original still exists. I began to fear that the other people helping me in my search might not find anything either.
I found, and I think you're going to find it very interesting.
Right.
It took a lot of time going through not only the 1880 census, but the 1885 census. And Chloe is an unusual name, especially for a black. And there are only two in the 1880 census.
Right.
So you can see here's one, a Chloe Hawkins, and she's 45 and a wife. So I don't think that's going to work out. Well, this one is even less probable. We have a Chloe Williams, who is 4 years old. So I don't think that's going to work out unless your Delius was a real cradle robber. Next, I had to look at that special census that I was telling you about, the 1885 census. And this is where I think I hit pay dirt, because not only are the other two Chloes still there, but there is a third Chloe. And her family is spread over 2 pages of the census. Mm-hmm. You see, here's her father, Charles Baker.
Right.
And he's at the last of 1 page. And then here's her mother, Alice. And here is Chloe, age 17.
Perfect.
Well, the other thing that makes it even more perfect, that is on the next page of the census, we have the postmaster for Racy Point. Now, Racy Point is only a few miles from Solana Grove. So we know that this Chloe was in the general vicinity of Delius's plantation.
From the river off Solana Grove, Delius could have seen Racy Point sticking out into the river on the horizon. I checked with a local boatman. It's only about an hour away by rowing boat, even less by sail. So Delius and Chloe Baker would have had little difficulty being together, and the census reveals that there were no more than 20 other families in the area. So what about the 1900 census? Would it tell us if Chloe Baker had had a child?
In the 1900 census, here we have a Robert Baker, and there is a boy in his household named Frederick W. I looked through a lot of these census records, and Frederick is a very unusual name for a black. Also, you'll notice that Frederick is the only son that has a middle initial. The middle initials for blacks at that time period is very unusual. This is really the only one that I saw in going through the whole census for the blacks out in the countryside. So,
And
And so Frederick...
Now, you were telling me that Delius's father's last name is...
Well, one of his middle names is Wilhelm.
Ah, right. That's
so
what I...
Frederick W. is a possibility.
Because I know there'd been some name changes in the Delius. What, he was had a different name at birth?
Yes, he was Fritz at birth, and he did change this later. But I think, it would be extraordinary.
But Chloe is nowhere to be found. The other two Chloes are still in the county, but Chloe Baker has disappeared.
How old is this Frederick W.?
That's the problem. He's 9 years old in 1900, which would give his birth as 1891. So are the people lying about his age to support your theory that they're hiding the child? The Bakers, there are only a couple of households of them out there. We've got a lot of things going for us that might make a case for family relationship.
I'm a bit concerned that Frederick W. is very much the wrong age. Now, how can that... Is there any way of explaining that?
Well,
how, for instance, is the
census takers are noted for their mistakes. If you start looking through censuses, you'll find that they often misspell people's names. The test that they took to be a census taker was a handwriting test. It was not how clever you were, it was how clearly you wrote. And as the census taker walked down the road, taking the census, he would knock on the door and merely ask who was ever at home, who lives in this house, and what are their ages, and what are their relationships, and the other questions to fill out his form. So he would believe anything that was told him.
Right.
It was not double-checked.
For instance, if Chloe ran away but didn't dare take her child with her, she might have put the child with a relative of the family, and that they might, anxious to hide the child, have said the wrong age.
It could be. Whether the boy is, that's a 4 or 5 years difference in ages to hide, but if the child wasn't around, how would the census taker know?
Would Chloe have run off, leaving her child with another member of the family? I enlisted the help of Professor Janet Johnson, who knows a great deal about African-American family life.
If the father of the child was coming to get the child, she would hide. That's a typical thing she would do. She could also change her name.
Right.
That was not unusual at all.
So
because they love their children, even though their children were mulattoes, and some look nothing like them, look more like the father.
Right. So the important thing was to keep the family together, to keep the child,
baby,
keep her baby.
Her baby, yes.
Right. Okay. What about putting the child with an extended family?
Extended families are very big in the black community even today.
Yes.
But usually it's done with a grandmother, if a grandmother is there available. If not a grandmother, it could be a sister. It could be a sister, but somebody that they could trust.
So there seemed a strong likelihood that Frederick W. Baker could be the lost child of Delius and Chloe. I tracked him down through the census records and town directories, which showed that by 1920, at the time when Delius was gaining recognition in Europe, Frederick had become a railway labourer in St. Augustine. Just as you said that, I've just seen this.
Oh.
We found Frederick W. Baker. We found him through the 20s and the 30s. He's living in an area which is round about Christopher Street, and he also lived in houses on Live Oak Street. We've traced him until 1934. He seems to have had a wife, but it looks like it's his second wife, Emma Baker. There's evidence of her living in this area until 1940, but then in the 1945 directory, there isn't anything. The trail runs cold.
You've done well. You've brought us into a time period now that we may still find people that are alive that can talk to us. What you've developed now is you've got the potential for looking at death certificates. We have the potential for looking at birth certificates. And we also have the potential, with you saying about the second wife, that we may be looking for a divorce. In the meantime, we want you to go to St. Augustine, beat the streets, and find some people that can tell you about history.
We know of a Frederick W. Baker, who had a first wife called Bertha, and maybe she died because he had a second wife called Emma. And they lived in this area. They lived around Christopher Street and around Live Oak Street.
Well, I knew the Bakers lived on Live Oak Street. That was Emma Baker.
Did you know Emma Baker?
I know Emma Baker.
Really?
Well, it's so interesting because it was right in this area.
Yeah. The Bakers, they lived on this spot.
Right
but
here.
This, you know, two-story building, but it got burnt down.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Did you know
Emma Baker?
Oh, that's a different set.
That's a different set. Okay, you're not related at all. Okay. Okay. Tell us now. You are Emma's daughter,
Yes,
right?
I'm the baby daughter.
Baby daughter. She had 2 girls.
Was your father called Frederick?
That was my sister's father.
That was your sister's father?
She's dead.
All right. Okay. Sorry, we've been looking for a long time, so you know, it's sort of exciting. So at last I had found someone who was directly related. Her half-sister Inez would have been Delius's granddaughter.
And how much older is Inez than you?
We was 12 and a half years apart.
Okay, so
I told my mom, I said, you must have forgot about me.
Inez's father, Frederick W. Baker, died in 1934, the same year that Delius died. My search had taken me a lot further than I ever dreamed possible. I'm now convinced that Frederick W. Baker was Delius's long-lost son, and that Chloe Baker, who lived at Racy Point, was the girl who inspired so much of Delius's music. But what matters most to me is that my experience in Florida will always affect the way I play the music of Frederick Delius.